Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well informed. Today, we're tackling something pretty deeply ingrained, I think. This idea that international politics is just, well, a constant game of deception. Leaders always lying to each other, right? Especially when the stakes are high. It feels like it has to be that way. But get ready, because our source material today offers a really surprising counterargument. We're doing a deep dive into John J. Mearsheimer's book, Why Leaders Lie: The Truth About Lying in International Politics. And this isn't just about, listing lies. It's a deep look at the nuanced, often counterintuitive reasons leaders deceive, who they actually lie to, and, important, the consequences. So our mission today is to give you a new way to look at global events. We'll dissect the motivations behind state deception, help you see the true costs, especially for democracies. We're aiming for those nuggets of knowledge, those aha moments. Mearsheimer gives us this analytical framework distinguishing different kinds of lies from, well, other types of deception.
Yeah, it's fascinating actually how he starts by just nailing down what we even mean by lying. Because before you ask who's lying to whom, you got to define your terms. And like you said, not all deception is created equal in his view.
Okay, let's unpack that. We do tend to use deception pretty broadly. So what's Mearsheimer's specific definition of lying?
Right. For Mearsheimer, lying is when a person makes a statement that he knows or suspects to be false in the hope that others will think it is true.
Yeah.
It's a deliberate positive action. It's not just saying something untrue. It can even be arranging facts, true facts, in a way that points someone towards a false conclusion. The key is that active intent to mislead.
Huh. So it's not just the outright falsehood. It could be like cleverly framing the truth to make someone believe something else entirely. That's subtle. How is that different from other ways leaders might obscure things?
Well, he draws a clear line between lying and two other things. First is concealment. That's simply withholding information that might hurt your case. You just stay silent. His example is the Bush administration not revealing, before the Iraq War, that al-Qaeda figures had actually denied links with Saddam. They didn't lie about it, they just didn't share that info.
Okay, so concealment is passive. What about spinning? We hear that one all the time.
Exactly. Spinning is when you emphasize certain facts, link them together to your advantage, and kind of downplay or ignore the inconvenient bits. You shape the story using truth, but you're not fabricating it to tell a false story. Mearsheimer quotes Tiger Woods, which sums it up perfectly. You can always tell the truth, but you don't have to tell the whole truth.
Ah, like a lawyer making their case. Spin the facts, but don't invent them.
Precisely. And Mearsheimer argues lying is seen as worse, harder to detect, which is why it's so stigmatized in, say, domestic life. But, and this is the interesting part, he finds it's maybe less stigmatized in international politics.
Which raises that big question. Why the difference? Why more acceptable between nations?
Well, his argument boils down to the nature of the international system. He calls it anarchic, no-world government, right?
Yeah.
So states are in a self-help situation. A leader's top job is survival. If lying seems necessary for national security, well, the pressure to use it is immense. Domestically, though, society relies on trust, on rules. Widespread lying there corrodes the whole system.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. You mentioned this surprising finding. You'd think Mearsheimer would just find endless examples of leaders lying to other leaders, right? Constant bluffing. But that wasn't the main story he found.
No, it really wasn't. He came away with two main, quite counterintuitive conclusions. First, leaders do not lie very often to other countries. That just flies in the face of common cynicism.
Yeah.
And when they do deceive other states, they often prefer concealment, just keeping quiet, over outright lies.
Wow. Okay, so less lying between states. What was the second finding?
The second one is maybe even more striking. Leaders appear to be more likely to lie to their own people about foreign policy issues than to other countries. And he specifically notes this seems particularly true in democracies.
That's quite something. So if diplomacy isn't this constant web of lies we imagine, why don't leaders lie more often to other countries? Wouldn't it give them an edge?
There are good reasons, according to Mearsheimer. A big one is just the fundamental lack of trust. States are naturally suspicious of each other in this anarchic system. Reagan's trust but verify.
Right.
It's actually really hard to bamboozle other leaders on critical issues because they're already expecting deception and looking for proof.
So the other side is already on high alert.
Exactly. And the stakes are just too high, especially in national security, what he calls high politics. You really can't afford to be fooled when your country's safety is on the line. Yeah. Capabilities, like armies, are somewhat visible. Intentions, much harder to know, so you're wary. Even in less critical areas, low politics like trade talks, he argues lying isn't that common. The potential gains are usually small, and getting caught damages your reputation for future deals. It's often not worth the risk.
Okay, that makes sense. Other governments are skeptical, the risks are high. But that flips the question. Why are leaders then more likely to lie to their own citizens? Isn't that a bigger betrayal?
It feels like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the dynamic is totally different. First, people generally tend to trust their government, much more than governments trust each other. This makes the public, paradoxically, easier to fool.
Less natural suspicion.
Right. Second, leaders have way more control over information domestically. They've got the intelligence agencies, the bully pulpit, as you mentioned earlier. They can shape the narrative.
They control the mic, essentially.
Pretty much. And third, often leaders lie because they believe it's in the national interest. They might feel they have a kind of moral duty to lie to protect the country, especially if they think the public just won't understand the threat or won't support a necessary but unpopular action. They see it as acting for the people's good, even if it means deceiving them.
Okay, so if leaders do lie strategically, what kinds of lies does Mearsheimer identify? He has categories, right? Told for the country's good, not personal gain.
Yes, he outlines 5 main types of strategic lies. The first is probably what most people think of: interstate lies. These are aimed directly at other countries, trying to get a strategic advantage.
Like bluffing in poker.
Kind of. Examples include exaggerating your strength to deter someone. Hitler did this with the Wehrmacht in the 30s. Or the opposite, hiding your capabilities so you don't provoke someone, or to maintain an element of surprise. Think about Israel's nuclear program in the 60s, keeping it secret from the U.S.
Okay, exaggerating or hiding power. What else?
Downplaying hostile intentions. Basically, saying peace while planning an attack. Hitler again, before WWII. Or Nixon misleading Castro about the Bay of Pigs invasion. Then there are empty threats. Making threats you don't intend to carry out, hoping to coerce or deter. NATO's Cold War nuclear posture could be seen partly like this threatening massive retaliation maybe wasn't always fully intended, but it served deterrence.
Trying to scare someone off without having to act.
Right. And finally, lying during negotiations, usually about your bottom line, to get a better deal. Like Greece, fudging his budget numbers to get into the Eurozone.
That's a whole toolkit for dealing with other states. But the next category you mentioned, fear-mongering, that sounds like it's aimed inwards at your own people.
Exactly right. Fear-mongering is when leaders lie to their own citizens about a foreign threat. They believe the public doesn't get it or isn't taking it seriously enough. The goal is to, scare people into supporting a certain policy or making sacrifices.
Can you give some examples? This sounds potent.
Oh, definitely. Mearsheimer gives some stark ones. FDR and the USS Greer incident back in 1941. Roosevelt misrepresented what happened, made it sound like an unprovoked German attack to build support for entering WWII. He left out key details about the ship pursuing the U-boat.
Wow, okay.
Then there's LBJ in the Gulf of Tonkin in '64. The administration claimed incontrovertible evidence of a North Vietnamese attack that was, well, questionable at best. That lie led directly to the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, massively escalating the Vietnam War.
And more recently,
The Bush administration and the run-up to the Iraq War in 2003, Mearsheimer points to claims of bulletproof evidence linking Saddam to al-Qaeda. Absolute certainty about WMDs, things that just weren't true, used to sell the war.
it seems like a recurring pattern, especially for going to war. Why do leaders do this, risking public trust like that?
Mearsheimer suggests it often stems from a belief that the public is maybe ignorant or too complacent, or that the political system is too slow or divided to act. Dean Acheson famously said, arguments sometimes need to be clearer than truth to move people. Leaders have the info, the platform, and people want to trust their government.
And you said this is more common in democracies and for certain situations.
Yes, he argues it's more likely in democracies because leaders need public support. Also in offshore balancers like the U.S., where threats feel distant and might need amplifying, and especially for wars of choice, which are harder sells than defending against a direct attack.
Okay, fear-mongering is one type aimed at the public. What about strategic cover-ups? That sounds different.
It is. Strategic cover-ups are lies told to hide failures or controversial policies. Again, mainly from the public, sometimes from other states too. The goal is still supposedly to protect the country.
Hiding mistakes or unpopular but maybe necessary actions?
Exactly. Mearsheimer calls Kennedy's handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis resolution a noble lie. He secretly agreed to pull U.S. missiles from Turkey, but denied it publicly to save face politically and avoid upsetting NATO allies. He felt the secret deal was vital to avoid nuclear war.
That's a high-stakes example. Any others?
During WWI, French leaders covered up Marshal Joffre's failures at Verdun. They lied about his competence to keep public morale up and the war effort going. Admitting the truth seemed too damaging at the time.
So it's about preventing panic or maintaining unity or pushing through something unpopular but seen as vital. When do these happen most?
They're more likely in dangerous situations, crises, wartime especially, for hiding failed policies. For controversial policies, they're more common in democracies because leaders worry about public backlash against something they think is strategically necessary but won't poll well.
Got it. Okay, next on the list, nationalist myths. These sound less about specific events and more about identity.
That's a good way to put it. Nationalist myths are lies, mainly told to the home audience about the country's past, usually painting your own side as virtuous and the other side as wrong. The purpose is to build group cohesion, national pride, make people willing to fight for the country. Think about post-WWII Germany and the myth of the clean Wehrmacht, trying to separate the regular army from Nazi crimes.
So these are stories nations tell themselves.
Yes, continuously reinforced. They often get more intense after wars or founding periods, especially if those periods were brutal or recent. It's about creating a shared, often flattering narrative.
And the last category, liberal lies. What's that about?
Liberal lies are interesting. They're lies told to cover up actions that clash with widely accepted international norms and laws' liberal values, essentially. States want to appear ethical and law-abiding, even when their actions, driven by realism, aren't.
Like putting a positive spin on questionable behavior.
Kind of. During WWII, the Allies portrayed Stalin as Uncle Joe, downplaying the nasty realities of his regime to justify the alliance against Hitler. They needed him, so they spun the story. Another example, the British government lying to its own public during WWII about bombing German cities. They claimed precision strikes on military targets, but were actually deliberately targeting civilian areas. That truth was too harsh for the public narrative of a just war.
So when realism dictates one action, but liberal ideals conflict, leaders act realistically but talk liberally.
That's the core idea Mearsheimer presents. Elites act like realists but talk like liberals.
Okay, we've got the 5 types: interstate lies, fear-mongering, strategic cover-ups, nationalist myths, and liberal lies. They can offer benefits, clearly, or leaders wouldn't use them. But what are the costs? Mearsheimer talks about blowback and backfiring, right?
Yes, the downsides are crucial. He distinguishes 2 types of negative consequences. Blowback is the domestic damage. Lying about foreign policy can create a poisonous culture of dishonesty at home. It can cripple policymaking, undermine the rule of law, alienate the public, potentially damaging democracy itself.
So the lying spills over, contaminates domestic politics.
Exactly. Then there's backfiring. That's when the lie fails in its foreign policy goal, or even makes things worse for the country than if they hadn't lied. The lie doesn't work, or it creates new problems.
Okay, blowback at home, backfiring abroad. How do these risks stack up for the different types of lies? Are some riskier than others?
Very much so. The risks are definitely not equal. Interstate lies, surprisingly, tend to have minimal blowback. People often accept that international politics plays by different rules. Think of business negotiations. People expect some bluffing. It doesn't usually poison your family life. The backfiring risk is moderate. Getting caught damages your reputation, or a lie like Khrushchev's missile gap could provoke an arms race.
So lying to other countries doesn't necessarily corrupt your own society. What about the others?
Nationalist myths and liberal lies also tend to have low blowback. People want to believe their country is noble, so they often don't even see these as lies. As Orwell said, nationalism involves self-deception. Backfiring risk is also low because the foreign policy usually drives the myth, not the other way around.
Okay, those seem relatively low risk in terms of consequences, which leaves fear-mongering and cover-ups.
And that's where the danger really lies, according to Mearsheimer. Fear-mongering carries a high blowback risk. Why? Because it shows the leadership has low regard for the public's intelligence or courage. That contempt can easily bleed into domestic affairs.
It breeds cynicism and distrust from the top down.
Precisely. And the backfiring risk is also high. Fear-mongering distorts debate, leads to bad policy based on false premises. Think Vietnam, Iraq. When the lies unravel, public support collapses, and the strategic failure is often huge.
A double whammy. Damages democracy at home, leads to disasters abroad. What about cover-ups?
Strategic cover-ups are similarly dangerous. High blowback risk because, again, leaders are deciding the public can't handle the truth, which erodes trust. And high backfiring risk because hiding failures prevents learning and accountability. Bad policies or incompetent leaders might stay in place longer. Covering up Joffrey's mistakes arguably prolonged a flawed strategy in WWI, costing more lives.
So fear-mongering and cover-ups, those are the ones we really need to watch out for. What does this all mean for us then? Taking this deep dive, Mearsheimer really forces you to rethink the simple idea that all leaders are just lying all the time.
It really does. His main point isn't that lying is good, but that it's a tool leaders use, sometimes effectively, sometimes disastrously, for what they see as the national interest. Kennedy's handling of the missile crisis resolution might be a case where a lie arguably worked, but the lies around Tonkin or Iraq were catastrophic failures.
And the crucial takeaway, the thing that really hits home, is that not all lies are equally dangerous.
Absolutely. Mearsheimer is crystal clear. Fear-mongering and strategic cover-ups are the most dangerous kinds of lies because they have that toxic combination of high blowback potential at home and high backfiring potential abroad.
And this connects directly to current events, especially for certain countries.
Yes, he specifically argues that America's leaders feel compelled to fearmonger. Because the U.S. is a democracy deeply involved everywhere, often fighting wars of choice far away, leaders feel they need to exaggerate threats to get public buy-in. And he says that's bad news because it corrodes democracy and can lead straight to disasters like Vietnam and Iraq.
That is.
Yeah.
A very sobering thought. It suggests that these aren't just historical issues, but ongoing challenges. So for you, our listener, maybe the final thought to chew on is this. Mearsheimer highlights this deep tension, right, between a democracy needing an informed public and leaders sometimes feeling they need to deceive for strategic reasons. Given that tension, what responsibility falls on us as citizens? How much do we need to question the narratives we're given, especially when leaders ask for support for costly actions abroad? It seems like the burden of finding the truth will often rest with us.